Okay.
All right.
There we go. Hi. So here we are. Well,
yes.
we actually started this about 3 minutes ago, and then realized that we weren't on yet. So so here we are. Hi, welcome to Downtown Book and Sound for First Friday.
Yes.
First Friday, and First Friday in Salinas is always a festive occasion. It's a happening place, and I happen to be in the happeningest place at the happening place at First Friday, and that's at Downtown Book and Sound with Kathleen Found. I know that didn't make any sense.
No, it totally made sense.
Okay.
Yeah, we're good. We're good.
But so we're doing this thing right now, and but the real event starts at 6 o'clock. Am I correct?
At 6 p.m. you can come join the party. There's going to be snacks. There are cupcakes with little Teddy Grahams on top of them. And there'll be a short reading and some time for Q&A. And
there's also music.
There's going to be live music too.
We have live music. We listened to the soundtrack. It's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
It's good. It
sounds gorgeous.
That alone would be worth the price of admission. But then also to meet Kathleen, that would be awesome. I mean, you just can't be in a better place.
Yeah, I will sign a bookmark for you.
Yep. Wow. Would you do that?
Yeah, I brought 50 bookmarks.
Wow.
So,
okay.
I mean, you're at the front of the line.
Oh, thank you. So, quick introductions. My name is Joe Livernois. I am a journalist in Monterey County. I've been here since Christ was a corporal. I work for the Carmel Pine Cone. I don't need to go through all this. But,
no, you can.
Okay.
You
Carmel
can
Pine Cone. I started out North County News in Prunedale. This was like a long time ago. And then I worked for the Monterey County Herald for way too long. And now I'm a journalist with Voices of Monterey Bay. And in my capacity as a reporter for Voices of Monterey Bay, I had the good fortune of meeting Kathleen and interviewing her about her beautiful new book, which we'll talk about later. But first, let me introduce Kathleen. Kathleen comes to us she lives in Marina.
Mm-hmm. Resident in Marina.
Yeah, and by way of Watsonville, and she's had a lot of she's been in different places over the years. Yeah, she's had her travels. So, and she is the author with 2 published books in release, and it's the latest book we're here to talk about today because it was released last
November 1st.
November 1st.
Yeah,
and it I'll read the title. And I need to take a deep breath.
Okay, take a deep breath.
Bipolar Bear and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Health Insurance, a Fable for Grown-Ups.
Good job. Yes, we went through several potential titles. Originally, I was just going to call it Bipolar Bear, but there were actually several other books already called Bipolar Bear. And for a long time, I was calling it Bipolar Bear and the Labyrinth of Health Insurance Claims. But then there was some concern that didn't sound catchy.
Oh, well, this is very catchy.
Yeah.
In fact, it sounds like it sounds to me like a book for kids.
You know, that's why we added a fable for grown-ups at the end. Yeah, just to get that correction in the title. It also kind of looks like a book for kids based on the art style, but that is simply the only art style that I have. That's why it looks like it's illustrated.
And you illustrated it yourself, right?
I did illustrate it myself.
So, and with all your experience as an artist and right?
I have no formal training as an artist. I just draw things over and over again until they don't look terrible.
Well,
and it took me 13 years to finish the book. So, maybe I should have looked into some training as an artist.
Well, no, because you know what? You're fine. It's beautiful. It really is pretty. And before we go on, we should probably make one more introduction.
Okay.
And that would be Theodore.
Yes, Theodore.
This little cute fellow right there. He's our bipolar bear. So what would you like to tell us about Theodore?
Yes, well, Theodore, he lives in the forest, and most of the time he lives an ordinary life. He eats garbage and fishes in the stream, gorges on berries. But in some ways, he's not so ordinary because he's prone to wild mood swings. So sometimes Theodore feels very, very up and he has conversations with the stars or delivers monologues in front of a captive audience of trees. And then sometimes Theodore is very, very down and he draws sad faces on rocks and turtle shells, or feels like he's sinking to the bottom of a ocean of despair. So lots of ups and downs for Theodore.
But he tries to advocate for himself.
He does, yeah. So. He hears from a friend. A friend has some delicious medication and says it made all my problems go away. And so Theodore thinks, hey, I want some of that. And so he sets forth and travels, across the desert, over a mountain, gets to a pharmacy, goes up to the counter and says, please, may I have some meds, please? And the pharmacist says, do you have a prescription? And he says, here are some leaves. And the pharmacist asks if he has money, and he doesn't, and asks if he has a doctor, and he doesn't. So the pharmacist says you probably need to get a job and work at your job until you can get some health insurance. And then once you have your health insurance, then you can get some medicine.
Now that's when the adventure really starts.
It's when the adventure really begins. Yeah, yes.
Because it's a labyrinth, isn't it? It's a mess.
Yes. It is. It is not so easy for Theodore to get help.
Right.
Yeah, he works at his grocery store job for a half a year before he's able to get health insurance, full-time status, and then he is able to see a psychiatrist and get some good help. He finds out that he's a bipolar bear, and things are going well. He gets some medication. He feels his mood stabilizing. He stops biting customers at the store. He stops talking to the stars at night. But then he gets a bill in the mail, and he finds out that none of his psychiatrist visits were covered by his health insurance. Oh, no. It's a claim denied form. Yeah. And he calls the number on the insurance card, and he falls into the labyrinth of health insurance claims. Yeah. And then he spends most of the rest of the book journeying through that labyrinth.
Yeah. I won't say if it's a happy ending or not, but it sort of works out for him, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, Theodore goes on a very long journey, but eventually, he experiences some growth. He experiences some peace. He finds a community. So, yeah.
So he's not an average bear.
No,
he's
not
a superior bear.
No, well, he's just his own special kind of bear,
and he's very cute.
Yeah, he is. Yeah. He is a cute bear. He has that going for him.
Yeah. So, you mentioned 13 years ago you had this idea. So how did you started working on the drawings?
Yeah.
And everything? So tell me about that journey. How did you get from 13 years, you had this germ of an idea and then this is what came of it, or is this what you expected?
Well, no. So the book just started as a little scribble on a scrap of paper. It was a cartoon I drew for a friend. I was in grad school studying fiction writing, and we had these 3-hour classes, and I was able to pay attention for the first hour and a half, but then after the break, my mind would just zone out and I'd just draw in the margins. And so I made a little cartoon in the margins, and it was called Bipolar Bear. And in the first panel, the bear was saying, "I'm the king of the forest." And then in the next panel, he was saying, "Berries make me sad." And so I had that little cartoon, and I myself had just received a bipolar diagnosis, and so I was processing that, and then I thought it would be fun to make a whimsical, silly children's book called Bipolar Bear, because I was in the habit of making books for my little brother. My brother's 17 years younger than me, and the way I stayed connected with him when I was living across the country is I would make him books. So the books were all about angst-ridden animals. So there was a possum with social anxiety who fell asleep whenever he was in an anxious social situation. Right. It's a burro who wanted to be a unicorn, a existentially lonely giant squid. So it just seemed natural. I'll make a little children's book called Bipolar Bear. So I started making some sketches. I wrote it. It was about 10 pages long, a pretty simple story. And I worked on it off and on. I always have a lot of projects going on. So I was focusing on a novel for a while, but every once in a while I'd go back and work a little bit on Bipolar Bear. But then the story got more complicated when I got a really big bill for a psychiatrist visit. And it turned out when I called my health insurance phone number and spent hours on the phone getting my call dropped, getting switched from person to person, that the provider was out of my network and my $650 bill was not covered. And I felt so overwhelmed by the bureaucracy of the health insurance system and just that experience of being in that phone labyrinth and how daunting and discouraging it was. And it made me realize anyone who's dealing with a mental health struggle, part of that in this country is dealing with the labyrinth of health insurance claims. So if I wanted my children's book for my little brother to authentically reflect the experience of bipolar disorder, Theodore would have to fall into the labyrinth of health insurance claims. And then all of a sudden, it was a 200-page book, and it was no longer for children.
Yeah. So how do you go about promoting a book like that and trying to find a publisher? I mean, this is about as unique as it gets, in my estimation.
Yeah.
And so trying to convince agents and the publisher that this is something that would resonate with people, because this is a serious subject, and you've handled it lighthearted, sort of. So how does that work?
Well, I always think that my books are going to be great hits. And so I was like, the hard part is just going to be finishing this thing. I mean, once I finish this thing, it's going to hit the market and all the agents are going to be fighting over it. And I had an agent at the time, and I finally finished it. I sent it to her, and was like, now I just have to cross my legs and wait for, the publication process to start, and I'll see it in stores, probably in a few weeks. But then my agent took a really long time to get back to me. And then she wrote me a very nice email where she said, she loved it, but she thought it would be too difficult to place in this competitive market. So when agents say that this is difficult to place in this competitive market, that means they think they're probably not going to be able to sell it.
Right.
And it was like, okay, well, all right, maybe this agent doesn't think she can sell it.
Yeah.
So we broke up amicably. And then I started, sending it out to other agents. And I was like, surely this story about health insurance bureaucracy and mental health told via children's book style drawings of forest creatures, this is going to have vast appeal. But I sent it out to about 48 agents, and the answer was, usually if an agent isn't interested, you don't hear anything back. Or it was, this is interesting, but I can't really sell it. But then one of the agents was really nice. And she was like, oh, you should check out Graphic Mundi Press. They publish graphic novels that have healthcare related themes. It's like that's not the only thing they do. But
Graphic Mundi?
Graphic Mundi Press, yes. Graphic Mundi Press is the press that published the book. Yeah. And they were interested in it. Yeah. So it just took trying a lot of places.
Yeah. Good. And as I mentioned before, this isn't your first book. You've done, you had something that was a little more, it had a more of a narrative flow, I guess, to some degree. But it was also a bit different. And that quick for you after graduate school, right?
Yeah, I guess it was a few years after graduate school. I finished a novel and stories, and I entered it in a contest that's put on by University of Iowa Press, and it's a contest for collections of short stories. And so mine was a novel and stories, and it won that contest, and the prize was getting published. And that book ended up being a New York Times notable book. So yeah,
cool.
So it ended up being recognized in the world.
Right. Both these books do have a very strong emotional element with sort of breakdowns and that sort of thing. So how, not to be too personal about it,
no,
but
right.
I mean, how much of this is autobiographical for you?
Well, like I said, I have bipolar disorder, and I found that art is a great way to process emotion. So if I'm feeling sad, I'm going to journal about it, or I'm going to draw. And so it was natural that, in my novel, like those themes and feelings found their way into the novel, and then they also found their way into this book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Tell me about your journey. I mean, you were raised in Watsonville.
Yeah.
You went to Stanford. Did you go directly to graduate school and then?
No, I joined a volunteer program called the Jesuit Volunteer Corps. So it was a year-long, year of service voluntary program similar to AmeriCorps, Teach for America. And I was a dropout prevention counselor in middle school. At that time, I thought I was going to be a social worker / writer, but then it turns out that introverts who like quiet and a lot of alone time and who are overwhelmed by a lot of stimulus, not great fits for being a social worker out of middle school.
Right.
So so I was living there in South Texas, and I got through that year of working at the middle school. And then I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll lean into the writing thing instead. So I just spent a year working part-time, for very minimal pay, just scraping by and writing a lot. And so that place I lived in South Texas, it's a really beautiful place, lots of palm trees, technicolor sunsets, there's cockroaches everywhere. So those were characters in some of my children's books. And there's, in South Texas, so many interesting people and interesting stories, and they all kind of made their way into that book.
Oh, cool.
Into my novel.
Yeah. So then from there, you from the hot border town, you ended up in Syracuse.
Went to icy cold Syracuse. Yeah. Yes, I went to graduate school at Syracuse in upstate New York, and I had just lived in California. I went to college at Stanford, lovely weather, very temperate. Texas, very hot, lots of sunshine. And then I went to graduate school in Syracuse, and the sun went away in September.
Yeah.
And so I was, walking down the sidewalk in a giant coat that looked like a sleeping bag.
Yeah.
And someone yelled from a porch, "It's October." And I was like, I'm from California.
Oh,
so the lack of sunlight was not a great fit for me. And so I went into a depression.
Yeah.
And when I sought help for that, that was when I received my diagnosis of bipolar disorder.
And you had a seasonal depressive disorder?
Depression brought on by the total lack of sunlight and, the glaciers on the sidewalk. Some people love the snow in the winter, but I think California is lovely.
Yeah, it does. It is. So as you were traveling your own journey, and as you were researching the book, what have you learned about? This is all about health insurance, right? I mean, that's the core of the issue. That's core of the problem with medical treatment here in the United States.
Yes.
If I'm simplifying it a bit.
Yeah. Health insurance is a nightmare. Nobody likes their health insurance. We fear living without it. We need to have health insurance, or we're in a very precarious and dangerous situation. But nobody loves their health insurance, and it's It's a system that does not make patients happy. It's a system, doctors don't like it. You know, when I talk to my doctors, when I talk to my psychiatrist, like she hates processing the paperwork and dealing with the health insurance companies. So it's a system that is only working for a very few people at the very top. So we would be better off with a single payer system. Now, when it comes to mental health care, the labyrinth of health insurance claims, I think, is killing people.
Yeah.
We have a very high suicide rate in this country, and it has been climbing, especially among youth. Now, if someone is going through a severe mental health crisis, it takes incredible courage to reach out for help. And we should live in a world where someone reaches out for help and they get help. But we don't live in that world. We live in a world where the care is mediated through the health insurance companies, and the health insurance companies create a barrier to accessing the care.
Right. Thank you for that, Kathleen. You're right about that. And aggravating the situation, obviously, is the fact that people who are having mental health crises aren't equipped or to deal with healthcare, you know, with health insurance and this labyrinth and the abyss that we're all that you're talking about. Yeah. And so it just and if they try, it only aggravates their conditions. And,
absolutely.
So I mean, what do you propose? I mean, what's the solution?
Oh, single payer system.
Okay.
Yeah, Medicare for all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, as I'm on Medicare, so it's it works pretty well. Actually.
Yeah. I mean, any system is going to be flawed, but currently, the health insurance companies are determining the course of care. Like, so let's say, for instance, someone's going through a severe depressive episode and they want to seek out an alternative treatment like transcranial magnetic stimulation. You know, that's FDA approved. It has very high success rates, much higher success rates than antidepressants. And people usually have to try out a few different antidepressants before they find one that works. So if their psychiatrist says, I think this would work for my patient, I think it would get them out of this depression, you know, quickly, the psychiatrist can't just prescribe that. They have to follow the health insurance guidelines. And health insurance guidelines will often say, you can't prescribe transcranial magnetic stimulation. First, you have to have your patient be in a period of depression for 6 months. And then during that 6-month period, they have to try at least 3 different antidepressants from 2 different classifications of antidepressants. And then if they fail at all of that, then it will be covered. So it's the health insurance that is determining the course of care, not the psychiatrist. The psychiatrist is the expert, and the psychiatrist is the one who's motivated to help someone get better. The health insurance company is not motivated to help people get better. Their motivation is profit.
And the example that you mentioned, that's 6 months of suffering.
6 months of suffering. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, at one point, I think Theodore mentions that the healthcare system isn't broken. It was designed this way.
Yes, it is working for the people who are making money off of it. So it's working as it was designed to work for the people who are benefiting from it.
Well, good. Do you have any closing statements you would like to make in your argument?
No, I think you've given me such a great opportunity to be on my soapbox here. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, and it's a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, lovely to talk to you too.
I don't know how we connected, but it worked, and I was I had a great time writing your story.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And, I wish you all the best of luck with your book, and there's still time. People can still
you can still make it. Yeah, it's 6 o'clock, but you can still make it by 7 for the reading, and we'll save some snacks for you.
Right. So good. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we're signing off from Downtown Book and Sound.
All right. Great.
Bye, Kathleen.
Bye.
Bye.